The whole population isn't represented at a Manuel du Mundo launch event. It's smaller than the Interlagos racetrack, but it receives more than 10 million tourists a year, and the whole world is watching. Today, we're going to see how the smallest country in the world works, the Vatican. Pope Francisco passed away a few days ago, and we're now at the moment of choosing a new pope. So the whole world is watching a very tiny piece of land, which is right there in the middle of Rome, in Italy, which is the Vatican. Not only is the Pope going to be chosen in this place, but the Pope is also the head of the Vatican, like the president of the country. Despite its tiny size, smaller than the Interlagos racetrack, does it have an army, police, a flag, or a passport? Does money produce anything for the world? Is a person born in the Vatican automatically a Vatican citizen? Is anyone even born there? Let's first understand what this place actually is, physically. It's really the size of a neighborhood right in the middle of Rome, surrounded by a wall. A commonly televised image of the Vatican is St. Peter's Basilica, a long-standing grand church that serves as the Vatican's central place of worship. This territory is 0.44 square kilometers. It's less than half a square kilometer. Just for comparison, Hopi Hari, which is a park near Sao Paulo, is 0.76. Interlagos is 0.9, Congonhas Airport is 1.6, and Projac, where Globo's soap operas are filmed, is 1.7. The Vatican as a country is relatively new, being less than a century old. It was created in 1929 by the Lateran Treaty, which was an agreement between Pope Pius XI and the Kingdom of Italy. Before Italy was unified, the Catholic Church controlled that whole central part of the country. It was a huge state, but little by little it kept getting smaller and smaller until only the little core that is the Vatican was left. All this is to say that the country is relatively new, but the buildings inside are very old. Just so you have an idea, St. Peter's Basilica that we see today started being built in 1506 when the Portuguese were arriving here. That's because before that, there was already another church built in that place, because that's where the tomb of the Apostle Peter is, also known as St. Peter, who is considered the first pope, who died in 67 AD, almost 2,000 years ago. Very cool, but can such a small place like this really be considered a country? What is a country after all? The 1933 Montevideo Convention established that for a place to be considered a country, it must possess three key elements. A defined territory, there needs to be a place. You can't just create a country on the internet with your friends. It needs to have a population, so a deserted island can't be a country. And there needs to be a government, an organization in that place to form the country. And not necessarily do other countries need to recognize that place as a country. There can be a country that isn't recognized by everyone. Kinda complicated, right? That's why it's hard for us to count the countries in the world. Because there are places that are in conflict that some places recognize as a country and others don't. And that's why there's another criterion that many people use to simplify things, which is this: if it's recognized by the United Nations, it's a country. But we're talking about the Vatican. The Vatican meets all these criteria. It's a defined place with a population, government, and United Nations recognition. Yes, it's a tiny neighborhood, but it's a country. And yes, the Vatican has a flag, which is this one here. It has an anthem, which we can't play here, or YouTube will give us a strike. The Vatican Post Office has a stamp, issues passports, and even has its own internet suffix. There are 5 agencies in total. In Brazil, it's .br, and in the Vatican, it's .va. If I had a travel agency, I'd register it as wanttogo.go. What a terrible joke, but let's go. Now that the Vatican is showing up a lot in the news, we're going to hear sometimes people talking about the Vatican. And sometimes you'll see in the newspaper Holy See. Are the Holy See and the Vatican the same thing? What do they have to do with each other? The Holy See is the entity that represents the Catholic Church in the world. A decision was made by the Holy See, the leadership of the Catholic Church. Vatican, also known as Vatican City, is the name of the place. So we can also say that a decision was made by the Vatican, just like we say that a decision was made by the United States. However, it's the United States government, not its territory. And as you might have guessed, the Pope is the head of both things. Of the Holy See, because he is the leader of the Catholic Church, but he is also the head of the territory there in the Vatican. As a child, I used to imagine the poor Pope. Besides having to say Mass, travel to a bunch of countries and all that, he also has to keep an eye out for potholes in the Vatican streets, check the garden to see if the flowers were planted right. It's hard to do so many things, right? And in fact, he doesn't do it. There's an entity that's kind of like a city hall there in the Vatican. It's strange to say city hall when referring to a country. Ministries exist, but they are responsible for managing the territory, streets, buildings, and everything else. In fact, for the first time in history, right now it's a woman who holds this position. Raffaella Petrini, a nun, was appointed by the Pope in March 2025. However, there's more to the story. The Vatican also has a pontifical commission, which is kind of like their own Congress there. It's more like a city council, but that's okay. And a legal body, a court with 3 levels. If you commit a crime inside the Vatican, you'll be tried there, and there is no prison. So you'll stay in Rome in this case if you're arrested. And yeah, there is crime in there because there are a lot of tourists. Pickpocketing distracted tourists is the most frequent crime. For those coming from Brazil, it's quite relaxed with little to worry about. By the way, there's also police in the Vatican called the Vatican Gendarmerie, which is a mix of military police, border guard, traffic guard, and fire department. But not the army. The army is a whole different story. In 1506, Pope Julius II needed more security there. And he decided to ask the Swiss nobles for help because at that time, the Swiss were the best mercenaries in Europe. Mercenaries are soldiers who fight for money, not loyalty to a country or region. But they go fight in other places if a noble pays them. So he got a mini army at that time. And even today, the Vatican's army is called the Swiss Guard. And to be part of this army, you have to be a Swiss citizen. They are trained in Switzerland and their official language is German, which is one of the languages of Switzerland. You must have seen photos of these guards at some point and remembered because their outfit is quite striking. They say Michelangelo designed this uniform, but that's not true. What they wear today is based on paintings that depict the old Swiss Guard. So in some way it has a connection with the painting, but the colors are from the Medici family, which is a very wealthy family from Italy. This mini army doesn't have the function of waging war or protecting the borders of the Vatican. The main function is to protect the Pope, because the Pope is more important than the Vatican itself. He is a very important religious leader who could be the target of an attack, so the Swiss Guard is there to be the Pope's personal guard. But what about the people who are born there? Are they Vaticanese or are they Vatican? No one is born in the Vatican as it lacks a hospital. Only a handful of families reside there. The Vatican does not follow the jus soli or law of the soil principle, which is observed in Brazil and the United States. That means that those who are born there don't have the right to Vatican citizenship. They will probably have the citizenship of their parents. In the end then, to have a Vatican passport, to be a Vatican citizen, you need more of a work contract. If you, for example, have some role within the church, work there in the Vatican, or work for some institution that is located in the Vatican, you can be a Vatican citizen, but it ends when the contract ends. Just so you have an idea here, there are 673 official citizens who have the Vatican passport. The Vatican's population is 458, with 120 serving in the army. In total, then, we have 882 residents. About half have Vatican citizenship and the others are just residents, people who live there but don't have citizenship. And there are absolutely no pets. This is on the official Vatican website. Although I went there this January and there are pigeons everywhere, you know. Do pigeons count as pets? Thinking about the actual physical structure of the Vatican, after all, what is there if you walk down the street? It's an extremely urban place, full of buildings, so there are no forests, no rivers, no agriculture. The only green thing you see are the Vatican gardens. Thinking about the Vatican's economy, it wouldn't really need to generate any income there, because it's the headquarters of the Catholic Church, an institution that's all over the world, but even so, there's a lot of tourism in the Vatican. The currency they use there is the euro, which is the currency of the region around Rome, in Italy. The Vatican, though not an European Union member, uses the euro currency and even has its own Vatican-themed euro coins. Some of them are really rare, and after all, why is such a tiny country so important? Well, it attracts so many people. 10 million people decide to visit this place every year. First of all, it's a very important place for Catholicism. So if you're Catholic and you travel to the Vatican, you could, for example, receive a blessing from the Pope himself. But beyond that, the Vatican is also very important historically and culturally. Just being able to enter one of the most important churches in the world, which is over 500 years old. In all those buildings inside, there's a network of museums you can visit through a kind of corridor that goes through all of them, with extremely important works of art, just so you have an idea. The Sistine Chapel, which was painted by Michelangelo, that story about how he had to paint lying down, looking up, because his painting is on the chapel's ceiling. It's actually there where the cardinals go to vote to choose the new pope. You probably remember well a part of that painting, which has God in the sky almost touching Adam's finger with his own. But there's another very famous work of art, which is inside St. Peter's Basilica, a sculpture also made by Michelangelo, called the Pietà. It symbolizes the moment when Mary is holding Jesus dead in her arms after he had already been crucified. For me, besides the fact that it's such a powerful moment and the statue is incredibly beautiful, in fact, we even made a reproduction of it here with the resin printer. What I find interesting is that I come from a city called Piedade. It has that name precisely because of this moment, right? Which gave rise to Saint Our Lady of Piety. Piety because of this feeling of Mary holding Jesus in her arms. So now it's likely that you'll hear about the Vatican almost every day until the new pope is chosen. Now you'll see it differently, having learned a lot here on Manual do Mundo. Remember to give us a thumbs up. If you like geography videos, we made a really cool one explaining about a new Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics map where Brazil is right in the center. Does that make sense geographically speaking?